Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight for our webinar, The Trauma of Genocide, Why Remember Now. My name's Heidi Berger. I'm a former video producer and teacher at Concordia University in Montreal. I'm also the child of Holocaust survivors. For the past 12 years, I have visited high schools throughout Quebec with a presentation based on my late mother's Holocaust video testimonials and her book called Witness to Horror. I'm also the founder and president of the Foundation for Genocide Education, a nonprofit Montreal-based organization. The mission of the foundation is to collaborate with governments and pedagogical experts to ensure that the study of the history of genocide becomes a permanent part of the high school curriculum throughout Canada. We are accomplishing this mission through advancing educational resources, such as the new guide available now on studying genocide funded by the Quebec Education Ministry. We also have high school presentation programs featuring survivor testimonials as told by the survivors themselves, their children and grandchildren, and through webinars such as this one to inform and sensitize the public about the importance of learning about genocide. You can learn more about our foundation at gened.org. I would now like to introduce Tommy Schnurmacher, who will act as host and moderator. Tommy has a wide range of talents, a gossip columnist, a film critic, essayist, humorist, journalist, and radio talk show host. He is also the author of several books, including The Gold Digger's Guide, How to Marry Rich, Canada is Not a Real Country, Are We On Yet?, Insider Secrets, on how to be interviewed, and a post-Holocaust memoir, Makeup Tips from Auschwitz, How Vanity Saved My Mother's Life. He is also the winner of the Golden Ribbon Award for Excellence in Broadcasting and also an active member on the board of our foundation, the Foundation for Genocide Education. Thank you, Tommy, for your help in organizing this webinar.
Thank you so much, Heidi. Experiencing genocide has a lasting impact on the emotional and even the physical health of survivors. This trauma also affects the families of survivors, and there's evidence indicating that transgenerational trauma is a unique type of post-traumatic stress disorder. And tonight, we're going to explore this phenomenon through the personal stories of both survivors of genocide, as well as the children and the grandchildren of survivors. What has been the impact of genocide on their lives, and how have they responded? And we're going to begin tonight's webinar with director David Peck. He's going to introduce a 20-minute excerpt from his new documentary, Broken Courage. This film is about the devastating impact of the Cambodian genocide on former Khmer Rouge rebel Suan Rotana. This will be followed by a panel discussion featuring Brenton Diaz, a trauma therapist for refugees and newcomers to Canada, Lydia Nimbeshaho, a survivor of the genocide against the Tutsi in Rwanda, Marie Kadigian, a grandchild of survivors of the Armenian genocide, and Jody Norton, grandchild of survivors of the residential school system in Canada, and myself, I too am a child of Holocaust survivors. Both Marie and Jody are members of the Foundation on Genocide Education school presentation programs. And before we begin, some quick housekeeping items. There will be time to answer some of your questions later, so please feel free to submit questions anytime using the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. Lastly, note this webinar is going to be recorded so it can be shared with those who cannot attend tonight. It is now my pleasure to introduce David Peck. He's a writer, speaker, entertainer, academic, social change consultant, and the host of a popular podcast called Face to Face. He has recently directed his first feature-length documentary, Broken Courage, which premiered in Cambodia in 2022 and is currently touring festivals around the globe. He's published 2 books, Irreconcilable Differences and Real Change is Incremental, which won a World Guild Culture Award in 2015. He's currently working on his latest book, Minimum Impact. Welcome, David.
Tommy, thank you so much for that kind introduction. And I just want to say a huge thank you to Heidi and to the foundation and to Robin behind the scenes and Anna, and also to my guest panelists, Brent and Lydia and Marie and Jody. Thank you so much for taking the time today to I guess to hang out with us, but to hang out with us for a super important reason to talk about not only Soon's story, Soon Ratana, this man that is the subject of the film Broken Courage, but to talk about your own stories. And I really do believe, alongside of Richard Wagamese, the great Canadian Indigenous writer, that stories are in fact meant to heal. And Soon has taught me that. Serendipitously, I met Soon in 2004, and I'm going to try to keep this as short as I can as I introduce the film for us. And it's only about 20 minutes or so, and I'm really hoping you're going to get an opportunity to see the larger film down the road. 10 years after meeting him, I was so impacted by this man. I'd been working in Cambodia. I came back. I decided to see if I could find him at the same Siem Reap War Museum that he'd worked at 10 years before. How crazy is that? Maybe I should be a gambling man. And so I hopped into a tuk-tuk, couldn't even remember where it was. But you know what? Again, serendipity. And we found Soon. And long story short is we ended up reconnecting. And what was so beautiful about us connecting is as soon as he smiled, I knew it was him. I knew it was him 10 years after the fact. And he had spent about an hour with me telling me his story. And it stuck. And it stuck with me for many, many years. And so this is now about 2015. I'm back in the country doing some other international development work. My background academically is in philosophy, but I've been working in international development now for about 25 years. And there I was, and I hit the record button, and so began our first recorded conversation in 2015. And today we now have this film, Broken Courage. You know, there's a line in the film where you're going to hear, actually you're not going to hear it, but it's later in the film, where a former Khmer Rouge leader says that, quote, his heart never checked his brain, close quote. And that's a comment on how was he able to commit these atrocious acts, these crimes against humanity so willingly and without seemingly thinking things through. And so that's what our film's trying to explore. And what's so beautiful about Broken Courage for me is it was really rooted in relationship, but built on conversation, built on friendship, and created out of empathy. And I really, Soon has taught me so many things. And one of the things he's taught me is patience, for sure. My wife, Elizabeth, and my kids, Spencer and Victoria, have taught me that as well over the years. But he's taught me patience, and he's also taught me a great deal about listening and listening well. And I think so often those of us who work in fields like this, and especially in international development, we come in with our clipboard, we come in with the solution, but we don't come in to build community and to listen and to step back and say, tell me a little more. And sometimes we really just need to lean in and listen. And that's, I guess, really what this story is all about. It's about, I guess, the past, not necessarily remaining in the past. And so I believe in healing. I believe in relationship, and I believe in, as idealistic as this might sound, but I believe in love and community and the ability to turn the world upside down. And so tonight, I hope we drop a few pebbles in the pond, and we are going to be able to watch those ripples grow. The movie Broken Courage, I'll tell you a little bit more about the direct translation, possibly when we get to the panel discussion, but it is the English translation of a Khmer word, Bakspat. And I also want to do a shout out to Nathaniel Draper, who was a cinematographer, to Simon Taplin, and to Sean Dell, and Nate was also a co-director on the film and edited it all. So many hands to make these kinds of projects work, and he might even be on the call tonight, or at least listening in. So again, thank you to the panelists, and thank you for taking the time out of a busy Wednesday evening to spend it here with us. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Broken Courage.
I spent time in war when I was a kid. I started holding gun when I was 14 years old. Bởi vì ở pi cam phol, cam mà riêng cam phol สำหรับ ศาสนาพุทธ มนุษย์គ្រប់រូប សិតតែមានកម្ម បានន័យថា មានរូប មានទុក្ខ មានរូប មានទុក្ខ មានទោស មានការព្រាត់ប្រាសនារីឈឺចាប់ ចឹងមានន័យថាពេលខ្លះកន្លែងខ្លះក៏វាផ្ទុយអាពាក្យកម្មផលវាផ្ទុយនឹងទង្វើដែរវាផ្ទុយនឹងទង្វើវាផ្ទុយនឹងសាមគ្គីធម៌ដែរព្រោះបើសិនជាយើងជឿពុទ្ធសាសនាពុទ្ធដោយសារជាតិមុនខ្ញុំបានធ្វើអាក្រក់ខ្ញុំមិនបានធ្វើអំពើល្អខ្ញុំមិនបានសាងបុណ្យខ្ញុំមិនបានសាងទានហើយខ្ញុំបានធ្វើអំពើដូចសម្លាប់អ្នកដតីកាត់ជើងអ្នកដតីឬក៏កាត់ជើងសត្វកាត់ជើងអីចឹងទៅចឹងនេះហើយក៏ធ្វើឲ្យខ្ញុំស្ងប់ដែរព្រោះខ្ញុំគិតថាបើសិនជាមានកម្មផលមែនគឺខ្ញុំមិនទុយចិត្តទេព្រោះទាំងអស់នេះវាកើតឡើងដោយសារកម្មផលមនុស្សដែលបានសាងអំពើអាក្រក់នឹងទទួលអាក្រក់ហើយរាល់ថ្ងៃក៏ឮដែរថាសាងអាក្រក់ទទួលបាននៅកម្មរបស់ខ្លួនឯងសាងអ្វីដែលមិនល្អនឹងទទួលបានកម្មមិនល្អអ្នកខ្លះខំសាងល្អចង់ងាប់ខំសាងល្អរហូតមួយជីវិតតែបែរជារស់មិនបានយូរអាយុខ្លីទៅអ្នកខ្លះខំប្រឹងសាងល្អធ្វើបុណ្យធ្វើទានប៉ុន្តែបែរជាជួបការលំបាកជួបការខាត់បងជួបការគ្រោះថ្នាក់ផ្សេងៗចឹងទៅថាដូចជាធ្វើឲ្យខ្ញុំ ពិបាកក្នុងការបែងចែកឲ្យច្បាស់លាស់ទាក់ទិននឹងរឿងកម្មផលនឹង problem in my heart in my brain my memory will lose around 6 years I don't know who I am before I lose memory I traveling on this road and then I start about my accent during the war how many people died how many friends died I understand about I am Sun Ratana (1989 or 1990) I'm very scared. I feeling emotion. I feeling sad because I'm survivor. This is Tomok. Tomok is a Ministry of Defense of Khmer. He control all military. A lot of master plan in him. I'm not sure how many people had killed by him. Now everything gone. Nothing to have. Just only dream. Just only feeling. គឺជាអនុស្សាវរីយ៍ដែលជូរចត់សម្រាប់រូបខ្ញុំផ្ទាល់ជាពិសេសគឺខ្ញុំសម្ដៅទៅលើអនុស្សាវរីយ៍រវាងខ្ញុំនិងប្រពន្ធរបស់ខ្ញុំខ្ញុំមិនទៅទេ We met when I am army ឆ្នាំយរេនេះឆ្នាំខ្ញុំមិនខានណា She is a Tomok granddaughter នៅនេះប្រហែលឆ្នាំតាំងពីឆ្នាំណា I like her but I don't know I'm unlucky she passed away from me if she survived until today very good for my life talking about her she's a very good lady I met her here. The beginning for me is I started when I was 14. You know why the Khmer very strong to lead the young boy? Because they have evidence. One day we have a film. And after we watch that TV, we cry. And then we say, give the gun to me. Not only me, all the boys, after they watching, during that time, I believe the boss, I believe to Angkar. Angkar, they like a Buddhist. They knew everything about people, what they want to do. In brain, in heart, they know. If we feeling or talking about I'm not believe Angkar, we die. យើងត្រូវតែសម្រេចចិត្តធ្វើគឺគ្មានអ្នកណាអាចគ្មានជំរើសគឺយើងគ្មានជំរើសណាដែលអាចជៀសផុតពីការធ្វើជាទីសកលសង្គ្រាមដើម្បីជីវិត I action in the battlefield because of Angkar. But who is Angkar? Pol Pot. But now Pol Pot dead and survivor like Kim Sompon, Duch or Nunchi. But when they answer in the court, they say Angkar take him to do this, to do that. They not accept, they not answer, yes, I am, this is my fault. Yes, this is my mistake. They not. They just say, if I'm not do, Angkar take me to kill. They should be say, yes, I accept. Like me, I accept. I trust. I say sorry. I thà đời xa cam phol ពាក្យថាកម្មផលនឹងគឺខ្ញុំប្រហែលជាខ្ញុំបានធ្វើអំពើអាក្រក់ពីជាតិមុនឬក៏ខ្ញុំបានធ្វើអំពើអាក្រក់ក្នុងជាតិនេះហើយខ្ញុំគិតថាការប្រត់និរិះប្រត់ប្រាស់ឲ្យខ្សែជីវិតរបស់ខ្ញុំដែលលំបាកនឹងគឺវាកើតឡើងដោយសារកម្មផលនឹងឯងតាមមើល ចឹងគឺបើសិនជាខ្ញុំលាក់ទុកមិននិយាយខ្ញុំជឿថាប្រជាពលរដ្ឋគ្រប់រូបដែលមានវ័យប្រហែលខ្ញុំគឺត្រូវតែបានឆ្លងកាត់ភាពឈឺចាប់ទាំងអស់ហ្នឹងហើយប៉ុន្តែគាត់មានការខ្មាស់អៀនមិនហ៊ាននិយាយប្រាប់អ្នកដទៃជាពិសេសគឺមិនចង់ចែករំលែកអ្វីដែលខ្លួនមានហ្នឹងទៅអ្នកដទៃឲ្យបានដឹងឲ្យបានជួយឲ្យបានចូលរួមភាពទុកសោកនិងឈឺចាប់ហើយរួមជាគំនិតយោបល់ដើម្បីឲ្យខ្លួនយើងមានភាពរឹងមាំ mùi ốc kè mà cái u tư hiện ra những vật của này kỳ bực cua cục lơ ở phu thì bởi điện phu chẹp quanh hay ở chẹp sọp cái này cứ không phải đông phu chẹp thì mà dán cứ sực trời ở miền mật ở đây vào đời phu miền krong chẹp sọp đai đây phu đaiแต่นี่คือเรื่องไอ้รีโพดอะที่ถึงพรำชนะวินิสกรรมได้ขมายเยอะมีอะไรต่าง
Young generation of Cambodians, most of them, they love the history of Angkor Wat. But not many love about the history of civil war because their parents, they suffered in the war, especially Pol Pot regime, and they never want to remind what they did. Since I was a boy, the monk telling, okay, if we start to care about the past and we start to hate each other, to revenge each other, that is not the ending of the war. History is the best lesson to learn for the future. Do not let it happen again. The first day that I come to museum, I'm thinking of putting the shrine to this place. We believe that the spirit looking after this place, because this place used to be a killing field. We believe that when we put the shrine, it's like offer them a house. Most of the story that we want guy to tell, sharing experience about the horrible of the war. We don't want it to happen anywhere in the world. He is a real young Khmer soldier. So his experience is a reality that people can learn about.
When they come here, they very emotional. I telling true. Because I breathe every day. I breathe about the history war in Cambodia to them. And telling about my personal history to them. They very sad, they very emotional when they heard from me.
He always empower people surrounding him to be great like him. But that habit, that he drink, that he smoke, it affects his work sometimes. I'm sorry about Soon. Really sorry about him. Poor man.
Anh thải mu chênh mình mu chênh Rap tăng bị ơi
Sao vậy kỳ này đi
Anh không phải chịu đi Anh còn phơi một anh bọn anh ngóp tập một bàn anh ấy Ôi tình gì vui vui thân tí anh ngóp anh ngóp mày ngóp
So listen to me, if you want to live longer, you should stop, give up smoking, stop drinking. You drink too much, you smoke too much, you know, I try to say like that to him. And he just said to me, I don't have wife, I don't have relative, I don't have children. Beer is my friend, cigarette is my friend. I start to feel, oh my God. I know it is not good to make friends with beer and cigarette, but what can he do?
Before explode jumps up meter and then explode. This is very strong. You know, 24 meters square, they explode through all the ball bearing or shrapnel, they go out, spread out, kill. This is a Russian corn mine. Corn mine or pineapple mine.
Oh wow. So this is used to be.
This is like the prison. They move prisoner from that the second store to keep here, and that meaning like more of the prisoner they are in this box must be die.
How long they will keep it here?
They by themselves. You know, sometimes 5 hours,
5
sometimes
hours?
6 hours, sometimes 10 hours. Some people take argon and die in here.
I noticed that the way people suffered, it's very, not just brutal, but there's a technique.
Yeah.
Like it's a process.
the
First, you need
process,
to
yeah.
undergo the this
Yeah.
way interrogation,
Yeah.
and then once it's proven that you're guilty, then you will get the first punishment, and then second punishment, and then you die.
I was having this existential crisis, so to speak, and I was depressed about that feeling of not belong to things that I thought I belonged to. So I bought a one-way ticket to fly to Thailand and then eventually make my way to Cambodia. Before I arrived in Cambodia, my previous employer, he was also very kind and compassionate, and he asked me to meet this man, and came to be soon.
They planting one whole 3 mile. From the first, they planting the bigger one face up. And so they have a medium one, the plastic, it got made by Russia, face down. When we step on the explode, we cannot see body. Everything gone. How can we say that inside of the stomach? The intestines? Yes, on the branch of tree. The branch of tree, if you see, oh my God, and there. You know, when some guy, before they got die, I go close them, but opposition group, I go to close, I talk to hand. And he take, you know, he meaning like he want to inform me that, you know, when I click listening, he say, please bring information, please telling to my family, now I'm gonna die. I cannot saving. Meaning like that. Meaning like they cannot bring the life back, they cannot survive. They say, okay, I'm go bye-bye with you. Could please to pick up my body to keep in the grave, something like that. Hard.
Wow. Unbelievable. Thank you very much, David, for that fascinating glimpse into a topic most of us probably have very little knowledge about. I would now like to introduce Brenton Diaz, who will give us a brief description of transgenerational trauma. Brenton is a trauma therapist for refugees and newcomers to Canada. He also teaches in the social work departments at York and Lakehead Universities in Ontario, Canada. Brenton has worked extensively with the Rwandan, Tigrayan, and Yazidi communities as they recover from the trauma of genocide. And he's taught about trauma, sexual violence, and mental health in Ukraine, Lithuania, Malawi, Kenya, and the Dominican Republic. Welcome, Brenton.
I'm so sorry. It took me a minute to find the unmute button. Sorry about that. Yes, thank you for the introduction, and thank you so much for that video. So I'm going to speak just for a few minutes on the effects of trauma. So the first thing I want to talk about is what are the effects of trauma? And so I have a slide here to share with you just very briefly. So this slide is talking about how trauma is the effects of trauma on people who've experienced a trauma firsthand. People very much like the man that we saw that we were following around in this video. So you can see that there's a myriad of different pieces that people experience. Things like hopelessness, nightmares, flashbacks, which is like reliving the terrible experience that they've had over and over again. There might be intrusive memories that come into someone's mind as they're even going about their daily life. They might have images and thoughts that come into their mind that they don't really want there, that remind them of the trauma itself. There might be things like substance abuse. We saw that also in the documentary, right? How this man was coping with his feelings through his use of cigarettes and alcohol. Related to that might be something like self-destructive behaviors. Even things like numbing And on the other side, there might also be emotional overwhelm. So you have people whose their nervous systems can be dysregulated after a traumatic experience, where they feel these various pieces. And yeah, it's just, I think the video probably displayed it even more clearly than what I could. But the focus of today, so not only are people who've experienced trauma, do they experience a myriad of different symptoms like you're seeing here on this chart. The focus of today is also talking about intergenerational trauma. And so I'm going to go ahead and just talk about that now without a slide. So we can go ahead and have this slide removed. So as was stated earlier, research and the experience of our colleagues here have found that people can be experienced by the trauma experienced by their loved ones, 1 or 2, 3, 4 generations even down the line. And there's a bunch of different reasons and effects why that might happen. We don't really have much time to get into the effect of that, but it's something called intergenerational trauma. And as was said earlier, it's a unique experience. So one of the things that we see in terms of individual indicators of intergenerational trauma is a lack of sense of belonging or identification with a specific family or a community or a culture or nation. Keep in mind that intergenerational trauma through the context of genocide is something that's really complex. And so you have people who've survived something terrible, and many of the people in their lives were killed and are no more. And so you have these people who are kind of dealing with this idea of, where's my community? Where do I fit in? Who am I? What am I all about? And these questions kind of get passed down through the generations unknowingly. It's not like family members are meaning to share these pieces with people, but these are thoughts that come through. And so we see things like this. We see things like low self-esteem. We see things like people who are more present oriented rather than future oriented. And these effects get passed down again. The same effects get passed down through the generations. There's also a lot of research that's been shown around the family and how the families are impacted. And it's, I'm sure we'll hear later on, there's some different pieces around families and how intergenerational trauma is passed down. For instance, research has shown that members of a traumatized family might not be able to identify or describe emotions very well. So what's happened is this person who's experienced the trauma, who's experienced that genocide firsthand, there's no words to it. How can you put words to something that we just watched right now, right? That's why the documentary is so powerful, because you can see it, you can feel it, you know? But family members, they might not really want to share what they went through with their children. They want to have a better life. This is one thing that many of my clients tell me about. They want a different life. They want a better life for their clients. So they don't even share. They don't even talk about what happened to them with their children. But yet there's that sense of emotions, like, again, that sense of not being able to identify with the emotions. And it leads to the younger generations having the same kinds of patterns in terms of how they interact with other people. And put along with this too, there's the idea also of silence. There's a silence that often happens in these families where families, in order for them to cope with such terrible experiences, they actually just repress all of those feelings, all of those thoughts that they have. And so that's why an event like this is so important, because we're bringing to the surface again things that aren't usually talked about, right? That's the reaction that I have even watching this documentary too. So for a lot of these families and a lot of people that I work with, there is just this silence that permeates. There's things that are never spoken about, and there's patterns of dealing with suffering that are never really never really acknowledged in the families. And so that can lead to all kinds of confusion. That can lead to a lack of being able to mourn, right? Even for the generations, as they look back and they think about their grandparents or family members that maybe they heard about once or twice here along the line. There's not that sense of mourning that people are really able to kind of engage with. So really, really powerful pieces there to consider for people. Sometimes this leads to a lack of connection to the culture, especially in a genocide setting, right? Or a lack of a sense of that identity with the culture or the people or the history of the people that they come from, especially if people have been killed in this way. However, another thing that I wanted to kind of wrap up with is, and we saw it in the video as well, so this is beautiful. as much as there's all kinds of issues that people have after experiencing genocide and the intergenerational trauma that flows from that, as people sort of absorb these different ideas that their family members have experienced, we also see incredible resilience. And this is even shown in the research, which is amazing. But I see it every day with the people I work with, whether they themselves experienced the trauma and the genocides or whether they're a descendant of somebody. There's incredible identification for some people when they can find it, of their family ties, of their culture, rebuilding their culture, reclaiming their culture, being bold to share about their ideas and share about what's happened to their family members. Again, with just like was said in the video, with the purpose of preventing this from ever happening again. And so I think we're going to be seeing this resilience as we listen to the more important guests here tonight, people who've experienced these things and whose family members have also experienced these genocides. So hopefully this just kind of opens up the topic and gets us thinking not only about the traumatic experience that's happened to people individually, but also if we can see and hear some of these pieces as it flows down through the family, as families communicate with each other and try to prevent each other from feeling the suffering that they experienced. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Brenton. We're going to now ask each of the panelists to briefly share their experience of genocide, whether as a survivor or a descendant of a survivor. And as a child of Holocaust survivors, I know firsthand how the trauma my parents experienced colored my childhood, how it changed my relationship with them and others, and what it did really on the outlook of my outlook on life. What is it like growing up as a child of survivors? Well, I can tell you one thing. It's different. You're different from your neighbors. Things are not the same. At my neighbor's house, my neighbor Howard, his mom and dad were born in Canada. They'd never experienced genocide or trauma. They lived a very normal white picket fence life. At 4:30, his mom would serve him milk and cookies. In my house, there were no boundaries. We ate supper when mom, who was a Holocaust survivor, we ate supper when she was hungry. If she wasn't hungry, we didn't eat. There are just various things happening that as a child, you don't know what exactly is going on because this is your family, and what's normal is what's going on in your family, right? That's how you look at it. Early on, I asked, the other kids had grandparents. Why didn't I have grandparents? And so my mother told me what happened to her in Auschwitz, what happened to my grandmother and grandfather, that they were gassed to death. She explained to me about what the tattoo meant on her arm. And as a child, when you think about it, when you think about the reality of what gas to death is, it's an expression, right? It's just an expression. It's a few words. People have heard it before. But as a child, I had a vivid imagination, and I kept thinking it through. And the older I got, the more I knew about it. I knew more about it as a teenager, and then in my 20s and 30s and so on. And when my mother would say they took us on train in these cattle cars to Auschwitz, and you're thinking of a train ride, and you associate a train ride with the way you think of a train ride from Montreal to Toronto and Via Rail. No, these were cattle cars. They were crammed in. There was nowhere to sit. There was no bathroom facility. There was no food or water. This went on for 2-3 days. People died in the car. This is before the atrocity happened. This is prior to getting to Auschwitz. And then again, and I made the mistake, and it impacts me even then, when I tell the story of what happened inside the gas chamber. When we hear about it, well, they were put in the gas chamber and then they died. No, that's not how it happened. It took 20 minutes, and they were screaming and yelling and had an idea of what was going on, and it was dark. And then the gases is coming in. People are crawling up. They're trying to crawl up the walls, and the older people, the taller people, are toppling onto the children. So you think to yourself, what must have that been for the adult, the grandmother, the child, that's happening to? I mean, it's as hellish as you could possibly think of. And then you think it happened the next day, and it happened the next day. So these are the horrors you live with. And what happens is it's such a horrible story. You want to protect your parents, right? You want to undo the Holocaust. Of course, you can't undo the Holocaust as a child, but that's what you want to do. You want to undo the Holocaust. You can't undo it. So what do? You spare your parents from your problems. You're not going to tell them what went wrong for you, considering what they went through. And you're worried about losing them because you know it's possible to lose. They lost their parents. You know it's possible to lose parents very quickly. So you worry about them. You worry if they come late. Instead of being a child, you're the adult who's parenting the parents. To this day, I don't know how to skate. I don't know how to drive a car. All of these things, I was told by my mother, are too dangerous. While she's being overprotective because she was worried something might happen to me because she knows that something could happen. Like she told me, I remember one day, it was an amusing story, actually. It was a winter day, and she said that I can't go to school. Why not? She said, and she told me because it's too cold. I said, well, the other kids are all going to school. How come the other kids are going to school? And she says, because Canadian parents don't love their children. Of course, it was not true, but this was just part of her, again, being very overprotective. That's part of the legacy that we get. But what we also get from them is resilience. My parents survived the Holocaust. Later on, they survived the escaping in the middle of the night over land strewn with landmines and coming into Austria. They survived that as well. So I learned from them resilience. And how did I use that during COVID when people were freaking out that this is the most horrible thing that could happen? I said, no, actually, it isn't. If I compare the fact that right now I'm worried about to make sure if I can catch the next episode of the Netflix show that I'm watching, if that's my main concern, that's not the concern that my parents went through and what they lived through. I learned from them that resilience, and I also learned from them the importance of sharing these stories, telling these stories, explaining these stories, and sharing these stories. And that is why I'm happy and proud to be on the board of the Foundation for Genocide Education. I would like now to introduce Lydia Nimbeshaho. Lydia is a survivor of the Rwandan genocide against the Tutsi. She's a mother, a speaker, a mental health activist, a psychotherapist, qualifying mentor, educator, storyteller, and founder of Beyond the Veil mission, which operates in Canada and Rwanda. Welcome, Lydia. Could you share with us what happened to you during the genocide and how it impacted you?
Thank you, Tommy, and thank you, everyone, for this moment. Especially, it means a lot as a survivor when we have people around us listening to our stories. In a short time, it can be difficult to tell what happened to me. I will do my best, although these stories, the same as, to my fellow survivors, can take days to recall what happened. I will do my best. In 1994, was in April, just 2 or 3 days, was on April 10. It was just a few days when the genocide started. It was on Sunday. And I remember our neighbors, men, came to our house. And at that time, my father was not there. He has left the house because they were trying to hide and coming together with other Tutsi men from the neighborhood to see what they can do, how they can protect their families. I come from a family of 6 siblings. I am the third. The oldest during that time was 10 years old. I am the middle child. I was 6 years old. And behind me, there were 3 other siblings. When they come, they have already found my father. I am not too sure they found him. and they just killed him in front of our house, and they come inside to find my mother. At that time, it was just 2 days after the genocide against the Tutsi has started. The priority was more killing the parents and the boys, or any male, anyone who identified themselves as men. They were killing those people at the beginning. Although as the genocide continued to progress, they started killing everyone, babies, anyone, raping young girls, women, all of that. So when they came in our house, I remember we were sitting with our mother, and my older brother and my older sister, I think they saw them coming. It was a team of men, maybe 10 of them or 15. They were carrying machetes. They looked terrifying. These are men that I knew in our neighborhood. Their kids were our friends. We used to play together. And we saw them coming. I was with my mom and my younger siblings. We were praying. My mother was Pentecostal. We were praying. We were scared and terrifying, singing. Up to now, I remember that song that we were singing. And then they asked our mother to stand up, and all of us tried to follow her, because as kids, we are very young. When they took our mother, we're like, what's next? We have to follow our mother. But they were pushing us to go back, but we kept going. And our mother, they think she just took her Bible, and they asked her to exit the house, and they wanted to kill her just close to our father, where they were just finished to shoot our father. Just to say that our parents got lucky, because if you were shot during the genocide against the Tutsi, you were lucky, because at some point people were actually even paying to be shot, because they were usually using other options that were more horrible. So we kept working with our mother. They took her in front of our house, and they asked us to go back, but my younger siblings were crying. They're babies, 2 years old, 4 years old, and me, I'm 6. They are trying to see their mothers, to follow their mothers. And I remember seeing them shooting my mother, but I don't think I have a feeling of how it felt like at that moment. I've tried many times to try to revive the memory. It's not there. I always ask those questions to Brent. Brent has always continued to support our Beyond the Veil, our organization, in the educational areas, providing therapy to our community. I remember recently asking to one of our podcasts called Gen 365. This is building a generation of hope. And I remember he was like, you don't have to worry about that. If that memory is not there, there is no reason to worry about that. So that's what happened to me. There are many family members who were killed. And just to summarize, I think the other question was, what was the impact of the genocide? I usually, as an advocate for mental health for the survivors of the genocide, I usually talk more about the impact. The impact, I think, in a minute, trying to say, I can tell you what it feels like to be a trauma survivor of the genocide. What it feels like, it's more of what it feels like. It's more of spending the rest of your life trying to balance I do apologize for technical issues. Just to summarize, I was saying that to be a survivor, a trauma survivor of the genocide against the Tutsi, I'm speaking in that area. It's like you spend the rest of your life surviving on your double story, because resilience is recognizing that there is what happened to you and the hope you have for the future. And every single day is to trying to balance both, with fear, with hope, is trying to live, fighting, surviving in a different kind. I don't know how to say this, but it's the more you learn about your trauma, the more you question every day of your existence. And when I hear often people describing survivors as resilient, it's like, you know, trying to balance both the fear of the past, the pain of the past that will take you forever to treat, and the hope for the future. Those two thoughts are a battle that we fight with for the rest of our lives. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. An amazing story, Lydia. Unbelievable how it happened. Jody Norton is our next panelist. Jody is a Haudenosaunee mother of two, embarking on a healing journey through reconciliation with the colonized world. She's also a member of the Foundation for Genocide Education School Presentation team. Welcome, Jody.
Hello. I just want to let you know I have a bit of a cold, so I might have to cough. I am a 4th generation survivor of a residential school. A residential school survivor. My great grandfather attended Spanish Ontario, the school at Spanish Ontario, along with his sister. He obviously survived. He made it back because I'm here, and his sister did not. She passed there. There was my family didn't really speak about it. Knew a little bit about it, but not much. It was something that wasn't ever spoke about actually until more recently, and I think it's only been spoken about more recently because on a community-wide scale within my community, within my reservation, we've been speaking about it. The survivors, the generations, the children, the grandchildren, great-grandchildren of all the people that were taken from my community, as well as other reservations around Canada. We, like, all of these people are starting to talk about this now. I think part of it is because we notice the dysfunction within our communities, within ourselves, within our families. And, you know, we start asking ourselves, why? Why are we like this? Why is everything like this? You know, I can only speak for myself and my community. I can't speak for others, but I just know, like, within my own family and sort of like my friends and my peers and coworkers, you know, different people within my community, you know, the dialogue has opened up. People have become more self-aware of all of this, of all the trauma, of all the dysfunction, you know. And we started asking ourselves why, and we started looking into it. Personally, on a personal scale for myself, I grew up very disconnected from my language and my culture. Part of that is because as I mentioned, my great grandfather was put into that school, and that was all taken from him. The school served as a means to remove all the culture from the children, remove the language, remove the culture, remove the ceremony, everything. So that's your identity, that's who you are, you know, in this world. And if you don't have that, who are you, you know? And that was the point, that was the desired result of those schools, you know. It was to disconnect, you know, disenfranchise, disempower the people, because our culture is very strong. You know, the language is strong. There's so much in there that gives us our strength, that you know, that has helped us maintain our resiliency till now, you know, because like not everything was completely lost. Some people were able to hang on to that, and there's been a huge movement in the last few years to bring everything back, you know. So for my own self, I started trying to heal myself through connecting back to my culture and my language. You know, I started my healing journey through more I don't know if you would say Western modalities of healing, but everything has kind of led me back into my own culture, and it's been very difficult, you know, because there's just so much, there's so much to sort through. Something I believe it was Brenton had mentioned about not being able to put words to how you feel for survivors of survivors of trauma, like intergenerational trauma. And that's something that I've really struggled with, like not feeling connected to my culture, not knowing my identity, but also not knowing how to sort of communicate that, you know, to people around me and within my family, you know, that has that's led to a disconnect within my own family. So it's really heavy. It's a lot of work, but I think it's worth it, you know, for myself and for my children. I do this for me, and I do it for my kids, so they don't have to.
Thank you very, very much, Jody, for sharing your healing journey and what it takes to get through something like that, to go through a journey like that. I'd now like to introduce our final panelist, Marie Kadijian. Marie is the granddaughter of 3 Armenian genocide survivors. She's a painter who lives in Montreal with her husband and 2 children. She's a member of the FGE school presentation team, and she has visited a number of high schools with her grandparents' stories. Welcome, Marie.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. First of all, I just want to say that I feel really honored to be on this panel and to be part of the webinar. It's been so informative, and I have so much respect for all of you guys. And what I want to talk about is the Armenian genocide. 3 out of 4 of my grandparents were survivors. It took place over 100 years ago. But I can attest that even 100 years later, the effects still linger. So generation upon generation of my family have felt unsafe, always under threat, and feeling subhuman in whatever country they were living in. And that's caused a lot of repercussions for all of us. So a little bit of education on the Armenian genocide. It took place in 1915, between 1915 and 1922, but it was preceded by other violent massacres. So not only did my grandparents survive, but my great-grandparents were also survivors or disappeared, so not survivors. And then also after 1922, there have been continuing violence in Azerbaijan against Armenians, and including in 1980s. In the 1980s, there was pogroms, and even now with what's happening in Artsakh. So each of the generation of parents were struggling with a lot of very stressful situations, very anxious, very not trusting the people around them. And even when we moved and we ended up moving here, my parents ended up moving here from Egypt, all of those experiences and their feelings and their emotions that actually kept them safe. So that extra caution that they had, which caused them to survive in very dire situations. But now we're in Canada, And it's no longer a dire situation, but we're still holding on to those anxieties, to that paranoia, and we're instilling it into our children. So I can really relate to what Tommy was saying about his overprotective mom, because my parents were very overprotective. When they went to work during the summer, I wasn't a kid that was allowed to go out and bike by herself. I had to stay home, and the safest thing that they thought I could do was just watch TV all day. That made my summers very boring. And now when I grew up, and very isolating as well, you know, not just boring, but isolating, which affected me, you know, and it also made me start questioning, you know, is there a reason why my parents are so anxious? You know, you take your cues from your parents who took their cues from their parents. So it's a ripple down effect. So what I wanted to talk about a little bit is one of my earliest memories from my grandmother, who was a survivor. She was 3 or 4 when her parents went missing. I loved her. I was so close to her, and she'd always sing. And I told her one day that I thought she would be a great singer. She could be a really good singer. She could have been a good singer. And what she told me was that she could have been a lot of things had she had parents. And I was pretty young, you know, and that really affected me, because in my brain, my grandma was this amazing person who protected me. And to think about the fact that the world was so unfair to her, that she suffered so much, it just kind of, it marked me. It's something that I still remember. I remember the moment. Okay, so personally, I want to talk a little bit about how I have been suffering with general anxiety disorder since a young age. I've been doing talk therapy and, you know, with the underlying supportive medication. It's helped me to address this and to try to curb that anxiety so that it doesn't get passed on to my children. That's something that I really felt with what Jody was saying, is that, you know, we don't want our children, we want to stop the buck, you know, the buck stops here with me. And a lot of what I wanted to talk about was about how I'm trying to connect again with my culture through the art and whatever has been saved, because we were also cut off from our culture. And a lot of Western Armenian culture. So Eastern Armenian is where Armenia is now. It's not quite the same. So our language is different, and our language is threatened by extinction, because not a lot of people are speaking it, because we're all in different countries. And the Armenian in Armenia is different. So, you know, I'm trying to make sure I know I'm fluent. I read and write. It's a different alphabet. I'm teaching my children. But it's, you know, it's a struggle. It's upstream. My kids don't go to Armenian schools. So I have to really make the extra effort to instill that culture in them. And at the same time, be hopeful for that culture. So what Lydia was saying about the pain of the past and being hopeful, looking at our culture automatically makes me think of everything we've lost. But then I have to, you know, say, no, we can't be sad when we're looking at our culture. We have to embrace it and enjoy the beauty and hope that our kids will take that culture and, you know, transform it and continue on. So I'm hoping to instill that in my kids. And one last thing, hopefully, that I can get in is the denial that Turkey still does not accept that the genocide has happened. That is just something that's still frustrating and still affects me and will probably affect many generations. So trying to reconcile with the fact that they may never take responsibility for it, that's really hard. It's a hard pill to swallow. But it's nice to have these kinds of panels to educate people.
Thank you very much, Maria. I want to, we're going to get to the questions now. I have a few questions myself, and we'll be taking questions from the audience as well. You mentioned the how the effects linger. It happened 100 years ago, and the effects linger and go to generation to generation. How would you say you and your parents dealt with the issues of trust, like trust in other people? I remember basically the message I got from my mother is that all people are terrible, and every now and then there will be an exception. Whereas my neighbors who were born in Canada and didn't have the same experience, their parents told them everything's fine, and every now and then there's a bad person, but most people are okay. I never got that from my parents. Most people are okay. How did that come up as an issue with you and your parents, the issue of trust?
Oh, it's very similar. And honestly, it's not something I completely connected together with the trauma of the genocide until you said it. And I was like, oh, that makes so much sense. Like they can find something wrong with every single person, you know, so, or, you know, like everyone has some sort of ulterior motive.
Yes.
And it's, you know, yeah. So I totally, I mean, I'm trying to be more trustworthy, and, you know, I think I'm doing a lot better than my parents, but yeah, so.
Lydia, I also want to bring the subject of trust up with you, because during your presentation, you mentioned specifically about that these men who came who were so terrifying and so frightening. Oh, these were people you knew. These were men from the neighborhood. This wasn't a strange group that invaded from another country. These were your neighbors. What was it like? What are your recollections, your memories of that when it happened, and how did it impact your ability to trust today?
Well, the genocide against the Tutsi, I think more I go through that, more I think recently I told somebody, I feel like more I learn about our story, I feel like I'm even ashamed to be, you know, we are at the best of our country right now, but when I see what the other side did to Tutsi, I'm like, oh my goodness, how can that happen? How can that, I have some of my family relatives who were killed by their relatives or family members, things like that. I'm like, you know, how can that happen? I think in terms of trust, I think my faith played a huge role in really helping me learning how to trust. That idea for sure wasn't there, and it took many, many years. I think I started my therapy when I was 30 years old. That was my first time being introduced to therapy, and the motivation was me losing my sister who passed in 2018 due to untreated trauma of the genocide against the Tutsi. So it's I think I learned how to trust from my faith community, really getting closer to God, you know, learning about, like, you know, who God is in my life, you know, understanding that I do not have my family of my parents, because in my situation, my family is just my siblings. That most of other family members were killed. It's either me or my siblings and my few cousins. So we grew up raising ourselves as young kids. It was in a survival mode for many years. So I think, you know, I'm so grateful for my faith community that has helped me to really restore that trust. But at the same time, the struggle is that every single day without my faith from the community, it's like, you know, Lydia, you are all that you have. It's like working, double working, trying to protect yourself, trying to overthink what's going to happen tomorrow. Everything that happened to you, you don't think in the moment. You think 20 years from now, because you're like, you know, I have to protect this. This is all I have. This is all I got. I remember when my son turned 6, now he's 15, thank God. And my parent died when I was 6. I remember praying. I was like, what if I die? He's 6 now. What if something happened? So it's those fears that we always live with. I see some of the questions in the chat. You will let me know if I can respond to that.
Yes, we'll get to some of the other questions. There's this one. This question is for Jody. There was a lot of national interest when the residential school mass graves were first discovered. Do you ever worry about the public's interest waning? How do we keep this dialogue open?
I don't really worry about the public's interest waning. But part of the reason why I got involved in this is to speak about it in schools and bring more awareness to what actually happened. So I guess in a way that would be keeping the dialogue open, you know, and actually having, you know, being a survivor of that, you know, being able to give like a first-hand account of how that intergenerational trauma affects me and my community and potentially my children.
This is a question for the panelists in general. Do you find your feelings are the same as your siblings, or and if not, why not? Who'd care to take that question?
I think I
Different
can
as in
speak on
siblings.
that.
Sure.
I have six. We were six siblings, and sadly we lost one in 2018. For example, among all my siblings, I'm the only one who can have the strength to share our story in public. So my siblings are not even at the point where they feel like, you know, I can share what happened to me. So maybe in a small settings with family members, we can do so. But, you know, feelings are different in a way, but at the same time, there is a collective trauma and there is also individual trauma experience that we all, you know, face. So when it's collective, we all know we lost our parents, something happened to all of us. But individually, that can be my sister couldn't move on with the impact of trauma, whereas as the siblings, we still finding the strength to carry on, to survive, and to go on. So I think we share the feelings in a collective way, but yet in a different way. So we cannot compare how we feel and the impact. Some of us are more strong, and we try to support each other's, and others are more actually, you know, not that easy. So it's more collective and individual kind of way we share.
Thank you, Lydia. David, this question is for you. How did you establish a dialogue with Swan, considering the impact the genocide had on him as a perpetrator?
Yeah, thanks, Tommy, and thank you to all the guests again. I just want to do a really quick shout out in case I don't get a chance to. I just so appreciate your honesty and your openness and your transparency, and this is where it happens in conversation and dialogue and moving this forward. I think, you know, the fact that I'd met Soon 10 years before I saw him again it planted a seed for the two of us, and I think that, you know, trust, Tommy, you asked the question about trust. It's huge. One of the first things I remember visiting Cambodia back in early 2000, I've been going there for many, many years, was this sort of exterior, very beautiful, wonderful exterior, but seemed to be lurking below that. There was this idea that maybe somebody would be willing to, you know, to stab you in the back. And so this idea of mistrust, very deep. And I think as I've learned over the last 25 years, reading and filming and becoming friends with others and hearing personal stories, it's a huge issue. So I really tried to listen to Soon and tried to become his friend. And this was before we actually even started filming, probably about 12 to 18 months. So it was rooted in relationship before the camera even started to roll, if that makes any sense. And right from the outset, it was important, very important to me as a Western storyteller and filmmaker to make him a co-writer as well. And so he took, I mean, he was a part of the process all along the way, and that was really important to all of us who were involved. So I don't know if that helps or not.
Yes, you can see that from the clip. Brenton, looking at the subject of intergenerational trauma, which you deal with so often, and as it's passed down through multiple generations, we heard from Marie, it's passed down from grandparents, from great-grandparents, and so it goes down through the generations. What specific hints would you have? Is there any way to limit how much of the trauma is passed down from one generation to the other? Maybe you can't eliminate it completely, but is there a way to limit how much of the trauma is passed down from one generation to the next?
Well, you know, I really feel like Jody probably articulated this really, really clearly in the efforts. Actually, everybody in their own ways so far has. But Jody really had a sharp way of sharing this. So there was two components that she talked about. One was the the breaking the silence, right? I talked about that earlier, how that's such a huge piece in some families, not in every family, of course, but in some families. So talking about it, working through it, whether it be in like a kind of like a Western type of context, like a therapy room, or whether it be in some other way, you know, a family discussion, two family members walking along the way and they talk about some of these pieces, right? But breaking that silence, starting to bring some of this stuff up to the surface a little bit, can be a really important step towards that kind of healing, to prevent and to kind of expose how the intergenerational trauma is filtering down through the family, right? It's like you're noticing all of a sudden the patterns. Even Marie was talking about earlier, like, oh, I never connected that with that. It's kind of having those moments as you talk about it to identify what's happening here. And then in that way, you can start to put words to it as well. And then the second thing Jody talked about, actually Marie did too, and everybody has in their own ways, is that connection to that culture again. So I'm thinking specifically of genocide, right? Intergenerational trauma can happen with other kinds of trauma too, but specifically with genocide, when you have the threat of a loss of your culture or a disconnection from your culture, having those opportunities to find ways to reconnect can be so important, right? You could establish you as part of this ongoing community of people, this line of people that maybe aren't around anymore. But if you connect with them, you're able to establish that identity. And I guess the last thing I'll say too, and it's something that we're all doing right now, is when you become more active in terms of like advocating in whatever way makes sense in your skill set and in your level of influence, to bring about a genocide education, that's actually shown to be really helpful too. So those are just a few pieces there.
Thank you so much. One last question. We're almost out of time. One last question. This one's for you, Marie. Do you think that your anxiety stemming from that intergenerational trauma, what would you suggest to others coping with anxiety as a result of trauma?
I think that what Brent was saying was really helpful, and how I really approached it was just to understand that it's where it's coming from. I didn't even know there was such a thing as intergenerational trauma until one day I was in university looking amongst the library stacks in the psychology section, and I saw randomly a book about it, and I was like, and then it kind of made sense, and it made things okay, you know? So like there wasn't something wrong with me, and this is something that I'm going through because of something else. So understanding that there's a reason why you're feeling the way you are, and there's nothing wrong with you. And then just being gentle with yourself and allowing yourself to be helped by outside sources, therapy, and, you know, there's no shame in if you need some medication to help that out, to balance it out, then go with that too. And to, you know, just take every day. And if something's too much for you, then set a boundary. You know, if you need to decompress. You don't need to see and talk to every single person and, you know, be the best you can be every single day. You can have a day off, you know? So that would be my primary, that's how I do it myself. So.
Excellent tips, excellent suggestions. Thank you so much, Marie. And I want to thank all of the panelists for this incredibly insightful discussion. And now I'll hand it off to Heidi Berger.
Thank you all for tuning into this webinar. I hope you enjoyed the discussion as much as I did and that you learned from it. I certainly keep learning, and I've been, with this foundation for close to 10 years. I want to again thank all our panelists for agreeing to share their personal stories, which I know can be very difficult. Kudos to David Peck for your outstanding film. And we've been corresponding with you, David, for a few years. And I'm so happy for you that it's being shown to the public. And we really wish you the best of luck. And our thanks to Brenton Diaz and Lydia Nimbeshaho from Beyond the Veil. And again, thank you to all our panelists. Our foundation is committed to educating both students and the public through the stories of our survivors and their descendants. We know that history is best learned through hearing these testimonials. But to expand our programs and reach even more young people, we do need your financial support. Please consider a donation by going to our website and clicking on Donate. Our foundation is also going to be hosting a gala fundraiser on May 25th featuring His Excellency Ahmed Obad Al-Mansouri, the founder of the Crossroads of Civilization Museum in Dubai. The museum houses the only permanent exhibit on the Holocaust in the Arab world. We encourage you to visit our website and our Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter pages for more information on this very exciting event, May 25th. Good evening to everyone, and thank you again.